So I'm going to record in case you need to step away or your attention gets distracted for a little bit. We are recording. Um, welcome, welcome. I'm so happy that you all are here. This is just such a complicated topic. I feel like no matter how long we're in practice, it's still, it's just kind of an ever-present. Do I need to go up? Do I need to go down? What do I need to adjust? Is this fair? Is this sustainable? All of these questions just come up. I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still in conversation with this question. So I love presenting. I was looking back as I was preparing for tonight. I was looking back and I was like, oh, I last taught this class a few years ago and things have changed. The way that I think about this has changed. The way I do my pricing has changed. And it's really interesting to have that time capsule to kind of look back and be like, oh, wow, okay, yeah. We evolve as people, as practitioners with the times and all of this. So let's dive in. Thank you all so much again for being here live. It's really fun, I think, to be here in real time together. I will send out a copy of the slides afterwards. I just finished them probably like 7 minutes ago. So I didn't have a chance to post them prior, but you will get them when I send out the recording. Okay. So let's dive in. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over some basic factors that come into play. We're going to talk about different methods that you might use to choose your pricing. This part is a little challenging. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about special considerations, some of the questions people submitted in advance when you signed up. We'll talk about different accessibility, some of the different options like sliding scale and pay from the heart and what those are and whether they're worth considering and the pros and cons. And then we will have time for questions. I love interacting throughout. So if you have a question along the way or a comment, I would love for you to put it in the chat. It would be amazing. But we will have a separate time at the end for additional questions. So feel free to stick them in the chat. If I don't get to them in the flow of things, I will circle back at the end. Okay, so to start out, if you've done any business classes with me, you will probably be sick of me talking about this book, Radical Healership, by therapist Laura May Northrop. I have a couple of quotes from this book scattered throughout. If you have not read it yet, I highly recommend getting your hands on a copy. It's incredibly good. But I really appreciate this part of the book where she says there's a vulnerability in asking to be compensated because you are saying I have something to offer and I want something in exchange. And I think that in our culture, especially for people who are healers, for people who identify as women, for people who are coming from different cultural backgrounds, the idea of asking for something for yourself is some of us are not as practiced in this area as others. So I really appreciate that there's this vulnerability in taking part in an exchange and in saying, I want to be cared for in exchange for caring for you. And the caring for that you are asking for is, in most cases, to hear tonight, financial. It's money. Okay. So as we dive in, I just want to remind you that this is really tender work. It's easy to feel all kinds of feels as we go through this, to be like, oh, I can't do this, never mind. There's so many things that come up for people around money, around paying yourself, around asking for money, around what is enough and what kind of life we deserve to have or should want to have. And I want you to just hold yourself really tenderly as we go through this conversation. If anything comes up for you, just note it be like, okay, you can revisit later. But it's going to be rare for us to have a conversation like this without things coming up where you're like, oh, okay, this is something that probably needs additional exploration. Areas of growth, learning edges, that sort of thing. I also want to tell you that you can ignore everything I'm saying tonight if you want to. How you price and the way that you run your practice is very personal. So I'm going to give you some options, but you can throw all the options out and choose something else because we're all just figuring this out as we go. Nobody can tell you the right perfect price for you. And so if some of these things don't resonate with you, you can just ignore them. I also want to remind you that you can change your prices anytime for any reason to include increasing them or decreasing them or adjusting a package to include or eliminate something that was part of it. Obviously, if you have a contract with a client, then you need to fulfill that. But outside of having a previous commitment, you can just, if you wanted to say tomorrow, my prices are going up to XYZ or they're going down to XYZ, you can do that. That's one of the glories of being in practice for yourself, is that you are in charge. And it could be, you can make your prices whatever work for you in the moment. We'll talk about strategies if you do want to change your price, but just affirming that it is your decision anytime. And then the very last thing I want to say, setting the stage here tonight, is that it takes at least 2 years to build a practice. And it's probably going to be more if you are also caregiving, have another job, having a chronic health situation, whatever else is going on in your life that can extend that time. So when I'm talking about pricing, it might look very different when you are building your practice versus 3 years, 5 years down the road. You may be in a different conversation about pricing. All right. So again, hold yourself tenderly if you have just started, if you are returning to practice after a break, or you've been busy with other things and you're sort of revisiting everything. Great. That's a different scenario than I'm doing this full time and this might, I've been doing it for a long time. Okay. So we're all going to be at different places depending on what's going on for us. All right. So let's start out. You may not know these numbers right now, but I want you to find them out as you make pricing decisions. Hopefully you know how much you're charging hourly per client facing hour. So ideally, if you have a 60-minute visit, how much is the client paying for that? You should know that number, hopefully. Or if you have a 30-minute follow-up, then you would just double that. Okay, there's probably a range. It might be a little more for an initial and et cetera, but hopefully you have a sense for the client is paying me, X amount per hour. All right, so that's a good number to know just as a benchmark. Obviously, that is only for the time that you are sitting in front of them, but the price needs to incorporate more than that time, right? I want you to also think about, what is your hourly rate? This one is a little harder, and this is where we start to have the feelings come through. How can you find out what your hourly rate is? Well, I'll tell you how. The easiest thing to do is to either do this monthly or weekly, depending on, how busy you are and how much you track things, et cetera. But you're going to look and say, okay, let's take September, since that month is already done. You're going to look at your calendar and you're going to be like, how many hours did I work in September? Not how many hours did you see clients, but work. Like, how many hours did you spend writing your protocols and fiddling with your website and writing your newsletter and dealing with Stripe issues, or, whatever the things were that you did for work. So if you are doing this full on, probably it's something like 30 or more hours a week times 4. If you're more part-time, it might be 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week or whatever. Estimate. Okay. And then you're going to say, okay, I worked about X number of hours in September. And then you are going to look and you're going to see, how much money did I make in September? And then you're going to do the math. You're going to divide the amount of money you made by the number of hours you worked. And then you're going to see, this is how much I made hourly before expenses. So it's not really a super accurate number, but at least gives you a ballpark. Okay. Again, this is where the feelings, it's like, ooh, it's intense sometimes to look at this number. But I want you to do it. And again, you may not have it right in front of you, but I hope you will put a pin in this to circle back to it, maybe tomorrow or after we get off here, to really open up your bank account and look at your calendar and try to figure this out. The other thing that can be really, really helpful to understand, just in terms of what is happening right this very second, is to look and see, how much money have I made year to date, month to date, whatever numbers you have access to, from each service or offer. So for some of us, we just have initials and follow-ups. It's pretty straightforward. Some of us have like, oh, we have a package, we have a class, we have a single visit, whatever. There might be different variations of what you do. But I want you to figure out, okay, from my menopause class I've taught three iterations of that this year. I have made $800, whatever it is. And from my consults, I have made $4,000. And from my teaching and other things, I have made 1,000 or whatever. I'm just making these numbers up. So I want you to look at that and see, okay, here from each of these groupings of services or things that I do, what's actually bringing in the most money? And then look at them and be like, how much time am I spending on these things? Because you will sometimes find that this is really clarifying. For example, when I look at my own numbers, I look at them and I see, oh, the biggest two sources of income for me right now are Monday mentoring and my deep dives. And then everything else is like a small fraction. However, then I look and I see, wow, I'm spending an incredible amount of time on one of these pieces of the small fraction. I'm like, is it really worth it to me to make a small amount extra? Or would I be better off just eliminating that or streamlining it and putting more time and effort into the two things that are already working really well for me? So for some of you, if you're just starting out, this is not important and you don't need to worry about it. But if you've been doing this a little while and you have some numbers, look at it. If you are teaching a class and you have made $600 from the class and you put in 800,000 hours on it, then maybe that is giving you some information that you could use. I'm not saying you need to use it, but I want you to just know. It's just like looking under the bed and finding out what's in there. That's what we're doing. Okay. And then I also want you to know, what are your expenses, either monthly or annually? How much is it costing you to run this business? That is a number that you really need to know to make an informed decision about how much to charge. If you are new, that number is probably high right now because there are startup expenses that don't necessarily repeat. And of course, income is kind of low when you're starting out for most of us. So don't freak out if it's really high right now, but don't pretend it's not there. We want to know it. It's still true, even if it's not ideal and it might change later and there's reasons why it's high, et cetera, et cetera. You're like, oh, but I took that one class that was really important. It was on sale. It's great, but it still counts. We still want to know the number. All right. Is everybody okay? This is this is the hard part. This is the hard part. And most of us are not numbers people just naturally, but these are good ones to know. These are good ones to know. All right. So yeah, stress eating. Stress eating. Okay. So now I want to talk about some options for how you might determine what to charge. And this, again, these are challenging. So just listen to, there's three that I want to walk through, and there might be combinations, et cetera. But just go through the three. Listen to me go through the three before, before letting your epinephrine levels creep up too high. Just take a deep breath. We're just gonna look at these options. And I'm not saying you have to do them, but I want to just present them to you. Okay, so model number one is where we're just looking at the numbers. Okay, this is a number-based model, which may not be a good fit for everybody. But here's what you're going to do in the number-based model. First of all, you need to understand some basic facts. And I am so sorry if you are new. This is a shock to most people to find out when you're just in business. But if you are in business for yourself, the money that your business makes, only about half of that is what you pay yourself. It really sucks. I'm sorry. It seems like if you make $1,000 from your business, that then you should get $1,000, but that is unfortunately not how it works. What happens is your business makes $1,000 and you get 500-ish. It depends a little bit depending on, your tax rate and like blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, the rule of thumb is that however much money your business brings in, about half of it will be your pay. About 30% will be expenses. If you run a super streamlined, very thrifty business, maybe it'll be a little less of expenses and you can pay yourself a little bit more. You need to set aside at least 15% for taxes. It's a sad number, but it's a true number. And for some of you, maybe more. It depends on your tax bracket and whatever else, your family, and if you have a spouse and blah, 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 blah. Again, 15% is sort of like the standard rule of thumb, but you may still owe more at the end if you are in a higher tax bracket. And then you set aside about 5%, which is profit. I'm not going to go into the full shenanigans of how this is calculated. There's a whole book called Profit First that's worth reading or at least skimming. I also have done a podcast episode highlighting the basics, which I will put in the resources when I send out the replay. If you don't want to read the whole book, because it is kind of a long book for a fairly simple situation. But okay, so this is kind of like, okay, because you're like, well, I wanted to pay myself $4,000 or whatever. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, but my business needs to make 8,000. It's a different discussion. But if you just know this, it helps. It's not the best fact in the world, but coming in with open eyes is going to give you the information that you need to figure some things out. There's also I found this hourly rate calculator from Chart Atlas. Again, it's linked here. It's not super precise, but you can put it in, just kind of go with there and you put in like, here's how much I would like to make per year. Here's how much my expenses are. Here's how many hours I want to see clients. And then it kind of factors in your tax rate and it says, this is how much you need to charge hourly. So you can kind of go that direction too. But when you do it like this and you're like, I'm just looking at the numbers, you can work backwards. You can say the amount that I need to live on is X, or the amount that I want to be bringing in from my practice is X. Maybe you have another source of income. Maybe you have a spouse who can support you or family. Well, I don't know, whatever else you have going on. But you can work backwards. You can say, I would like to make $2,000, $4,000, $7,000, whatever number. I don't want to put numbers into your mouth. But take whatever number that you want to pay yourself, double it, divide by 4 to see a weekly amount, and then say like, okay, if I'm supposed to be making $1,000 a week, I can see 4 clients a week. So I need to charge $250 per client or per hour, however you want to do it. You can do that. You could just kind of just do the math and be like, all right, to make the salary that I want to make, this is my hourly rate, and price accordingly. Now, you will notice that there's a lot of nuance. You're like, well, Camille, this kind of depends on being able to fill all those hours, right? You're like, okay, I can say that I want to see 10 clients every week at $250 an hour, but I right now have 0 clients per week. So that doesn't seem super realistic. Great, you can work up to it. But you don't say like, oh, I only have 1 client a week, so I'll charge them $1,000. Or you could try that, but part of this is dependent on your marketing. It's dependent on learning how to promote your practice and fill the slots. So in the beginning, you need to be conservative about how many, you're like, okay, well, I can probably see 3 people. If I'm seeing now 1, then maybe 3 would be a realistic amount to shoot for. But you need to think through what's reasonable given your current practice, or you need to have a plan for how to fill in those spots. Okay. So I just ran a little example here. If you wanted to pay yourself $4,000 a month, you would need to make 8,000 total approximately. That means you need about 2,000 a week. So you could have 2 clients weekly who pay 1,000. You could have 5 clients paying 400, 10 clients paying 200, or you could do some combination of like a class and a couple of clients or what have you. But when you start to look at it like this and you're like, oh, this is every week. This is not like what that one busy week I had. This is like most weeks you need to be having these numbers in order to meet your revenue goal. If you only have 10 hours a week, that may change things quite a bit too. This is where a lot of people get 4, 5, 6 years down the road and they haven't done this math. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, my practice is full, but I'm only making $3,000 a month. And I have 2 kids and I cannot support myself on $3,000 a month with 2 kids in the city that I live in. Some people that might be plenty and other people are like, okay, no, this is not close to it. But if you don't do out the math like this, then you're all of a sudden you're like, wow, I have the practice I always thought I wanted, except I'm not making my revenue goals. Okay, so this is like the money money first approach. This is the one that people find the most overwhelming. And if you are in a state of overwhelm right now, I hear that. It's okay. Just breathe through it. And again, this is something that it's not great news, but it is good to know. Okay, the next option that you can think about is the market pricing option. This is what, when I asked you in the beginning, a lot of people said was how you arrived, at least partially arrived at the prices that you currently charge. And so what this means is just doing what we can, if we want to be fancy, we could call market research. Freeze for a second. Are we back? Okay. Sorry, I was like, whew, everybody looks very intent, or we're frozen. Um, so you look around and just see what other people are charging who do something similar. So it can be a little bit hard to get this information, but for the most part, you can do your searching skills and just try to find out who all either is if you do locally practice locally, then you would want to say in my city, what are people charging for acupuncture, for nutrition, for massage? Try to find out your local economy. If you're working virtually, you're probably going to be better off looking at people who do have a similar niche to you or who have a very similar practice. So for example, I do fertility. And one of the people that came up, I was like, wow, this person charges basically exactly what I do. And it has like sort of a similar package. And I was like, oh, I mentored them. I guess that's why. Um, but there are people doing fertility work charging anywhere from $100 for an initial consult up into $1,200 for a package of 10, a 8-month package of 10. Those were sort of the range that I found of people doing, various things. So you could do something like that. That was just a very quick search. I didn't do a super deep dive, but you could. But you want to look and see, what are people approximately doing? How, you want to factor in, is this somebody who has been in practice for 15, 20 years? Is this somebody who's just out of school? Is this somebody who has, a doctorate in physical therapy and a massage therapy license and a nutritionist background, and they're doing all three of those things? You kind of weigh some of those factors in there, but you just look around and you see, what are other people doing? Now, I am not saying you need to be in that range at all, but I do want you to know where you are in the range. Because if you're like, wow, everyone else I found is charging somewhere between 100 and 1,200, and I am charging 65, okay, you are on the low end of the scale. I'm not saying you need to change your price, but you do want to know that. Or similarly, if you're charging $2,000 and everybody else around you is charging, 175, great, good to know, because you need to market yourself accordingly. If you are super low or super high, that changes the way you talk about what you do, and it changes who might be interested in what you do. Okay. Joe, can you steal from me? I mean, you're welcome to, but I always find that if you sort of mimic someone else's sales page, it never really sounds like you. It doesn't work as well for other people as it does for the person who wrote it. But you're welcome to copy my pricing model if you want to. I'll share some of them throughout. When you start looking at these different pricing packages, these are some of the common things that run through people's minds. I'm not saying you're necessarily thinking them, but some of the things I hear from people are, it is not fair. We start to get into judgment about, like, I couldn't possibly pay somebody $500 for a nutrition package, so why would I charge that? Nobody is willing to pay this. I could tell everybody I want them to pay me like a helicopter or something, and I would be equally as likely to find clients. I'm not worth this much. I don't know anybody who could afford this. These are some of the things that come up when we are thinking about these prices, and I just want to acknowledge them. I'm not saying that we should pretend these things are not here, but we need to think through them. Okay. The last thing I wanted to share with you, the third model I wanted to share with you is what I think of as more of an intuitive model. This one is based on Mark Silver. Some of you also have heard me talk about this book, Heart-Centered Business, which I also highly recommend if you have not read it yet. Especially good for people who are newer to the process or starting out. But the practice that Mark recommends, which I really find helpful for people, is to ground yourself, take some deep breaths, put your feet on the floor, and then ask yourself, I'm really feeling into your body, say, what would it feel like if I were to charge $25 for my package or my consult or whatever? And most of us cringe. Your body is like I couldn't possibly. The work, the care, the love, everything that goes into it. And then to have $25, it almost feels like it would be better to be free for many of us. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's how I feel sometimes. And then you're like, what if I were to charge $1,000 or $5,000 for my initial consult? Most of us also have that cringy feeling of like, I could not possibly, I could not possibly charge $5,000 for an initial consult. And then what you do is you take those extremes and you just move them to the center until you get to a place where your body is like, okay, I'm at the border of what feels good to me in either direction. And then you know that your price is somewhere in the middle of those, and that maybe you have a lower end and a higher end. So I think that that's another way that you could think about this. I always know that it's time to raise my price when I start to feel, I don't want to say resentment, but it starts to feel off. Like I start to feel like I am doing more work than seems reasonable for the amount that I'm getting paid. It doesn't feel good to me anymore. And that is my cue more than even like, oh, it's the end of the year or I haven't done it in 3 years or whatever. To me, it's not about a time, certain time that you need to raise your prices every XYZ, but more a feeling that in order for this to feel fair, I need to adjust something. Maybe it's my prices, maybe it's what's included or what have you. However, whether you choose to do this method or the comparative method, market research method or not, I still want you to know the numbers from the first part. Because if you do the intuitive method and you're like, okay, what feels really good to me is $80. But then you look at the first part and you're like, well, that means that even if I'm totally full to the max, I'm going to be making $2,000 a month, which I cannot pay my bills on. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but then you need to say like, okay, then what is going to bring in the remainder? Like, do I need to get another job? Do I want to, can I rely on another person in my household to pay certain bills? Like, figure it out because we want to have our eyes open to what this means if we decide, no matter what price we decide on. Okay. So I want to offer some transitional options for maybe getting to one version of what we just talked about. So especially if you are new or returning after a break, you may want to build up your pricing. If you're like, I did all this research and I realized I need to charge $200 an hour, client facing hour, but I don't have any clients right now. I don't think anybody is going to pay me that. It doesn't feel right. And when I do the intuitive exercise, it's just really not good in my body. Maybe what you do is you say, okay, for my first 5 clients, I'm doing 50 as a service, as a practice for myself, as a, whatever. I'm just going to do 5 clients at a very low rate and maybe even explain that on your sales page or when you're talking to people. And then you say, after 5 clients, I'm going to go up to 100 or 80 or whatever feels like a good leap. And you just sort of stair step yourself up when it feels comfortable and good to do that as you are building your client base. So that can be a really reasonable way to do this if you are hesitant to charge a price that actually is what you need to sustain yourself, or if you're starting from scratch or very few clients, you can scale up like that. Another option that you can do is offer different pricing levels. We will talk about sliding scale, pay from the heart, etc., in just a moment here. You can have a certain number of free spots that you say, I am going to have one free client a month or 5 free clients a month, and then all other spots are paid. And you can just let those fill as they fill, and then either you have spots or you don't. Or, and this is something that a lot of us, I think, have some wiggle room in. If you don't want to charge more, what you can do is be more efficient with your time, because then your hourly rate goes up. So if you are seeing a client for 1 hour and then spending 17 hours, that is only a slight exaggeration, writing up their notes, doing research, uh, making your SOAP note and sending them their protocol, your hourly rate is minuscule because you just spent 17 hours fiddling around with everything. So if you were to decrease that by half, still providing a great client experience, but maybe not doing every last bit of research that you possibly could do, or maybe thinking of ways that you could become more efficient, like saving a bunch of your research so you're not doing it over and over again, or what have you, then your hourly rate goes up without having to charge the client more because you are being more efficient. So you could think about, what are the ways that I could be more efficient and increase my hourly rate? All right. Yeah, 17 hours is only a mild exaggeration, especially when you're getting started. You're like, it is true. When you are just getting started, every single thing you have to look up. And so it is, but over time, I hope and encourage people to try to think of ways to streamline and so forth. Just as an example, one of the things that I've realized, it took me only like 15 years to figure this out, but I did realize that if I don't try to do everything in the initial consult, then the client is less overwhelmed. I am less overwhelmed. We just do what we can do in 1 hour. And then I write that up. We have plenty of information to get people started. And then we just do the rest of it at the next visit. And I will write it up then. And so I'm not trying to do every single thing that has ever happened to the client in the first visit and then not very much in the others. I just spread it out more. And it takes me way, way, way less time because I'm just like, okay, well, I understand and the client understands. We're just going to start. We're going to start and get as far as we get. And then we'll continue on at our next visit. I also figured out that having a really thorough intake form helps a lot to do that, because then I'm not worried I've missed something major because they've put major things on the intake form and I can, ask about it if it's very, very important, or decide we'll just do that next visit. So anyway, this is not a class about streamlining things, but it is an encouragement for you to think about ways to streamline so that your hourly rate goes up. Okay. I also just really love this quote, same book, Laura May Northrop. This is such an important point. Justice is not trading suffering for suffering. That is masochism. Yes, everyone deserves access to healing. I believe this. However, it is arrogant, falsely omnipotent, and unrealistic to imagine that I, a single human, am going to create such profound stand for justice that will heal so many people by driving myself into massive lifelong debt. Really want you to think about this when you are thinking to yourself, I can't charge a price that will sustain me because people can't afford it, because I want to be accessible. There are ways to be accessible without driving yourself into massive lifelong debt to do it. Yeah. So let's talk about some options. Here are some of the major pricing models that are available to you. These are not all of them, but these are some of them. So pricing model number one is the price listed is the price. There's not variations. It's just, this is how much it costs. It's like going to the grocery store. I was just lamenting this morning, the Kerrygold butter is $11. It just is. That's what it is. You don't get to be like, well, what if what if I want whatever, half a Kerrygold? You just get what you get. Okay, so this is one option. And if this is what works for you and this is what you need to sustain yourself, you are allowed to just have a price. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Sliding scale is another option. Bartering. We're going to go through the pros and cons of some of these, or having a specific number of free or discounted spots to fill, and then having the other spots be kind of full price or regular spots. So let's talk about some of these, and I can share with you my evolution throughout the years. I have tried all of these personally, so I can speak to at least my own experience with them throughout. Okay, so list price only, meaning this is the price, is what you see is what you pay. It is what it is. I actually do this for my clinic, my private clinic. I have a price, and that is the price, and there is not a sliding scale, and there's not a bartering option, and there is not there. It just is what it is. However, I run a free clinic separately, and I say on there if this isn't an affordable price to you, I have a free clinic. You can get on the list and put in for a spot in the free clinic, and I have a limited number of those. Sometimes there are spots available, and sometimes there's not. For me, this is just what works for right now. Another option that's entirely reasonable, if you feel like justice and accessibility and these sorts of things are important to you, it's often very much more effective for you to tap into a group that is already doing this work, such as Herbalists Without Borders or a local free clinic or whatever else. Like, you don't personally have to run sliding scale practice that's accessible to everyone. You can donate your time or money or skills, talent, whatever, to people who already have an infrastructure and training and a system set up to serve people who need it. Like, your work in service to your community doesn't all have to be exclusively within your own personal business. You can go volunteer at the free clinic or volunteer at Herbalists Without Borders or the food bank or whoever needs your skills and talents, and also just have your prices be what they are. Like, does that make sense, everybody? You can balance the scale without having to individually balance every single thing. Sliding scale. I'll put some resources of people who do sliding scale and when I send out the recording and the slides and so forth, so you can see there's many people who have lovely graphics and conceptualizations of how you figure out where people fit on a sliding scale. I did sliding scale for years, and it has been my experience that it's really hard for people to correctly place themselves on the scale. No matter how much guidance you give, there will always be the client who comes in that paid the middle price or the high price, and then you come to find out that they like sacrificed going to their, sister's baby's birth or something because they wanted to make sure you had plenty of money. And you're like, oh my God, you're like, no. And then you'll find the person who pays the very bottom of the scale and drives up in the brand new Cadillac or whatever. And you're like, okay, this is not, this is not working out. And then, or you'll find yourself in the position of having to police people and be like, I want to talk to you about where you are on the scale. And that was also, in my opinion, takes away from the work, and it's an awkward conversation. And it's like, why do you really even need to know this? So you absolutely can try it. I will just say I have tried it extensively, and for me, it hasn't been a great model. I encourage you, if you want to use a sliding scale, to set the price that you would like to be paid in the middle, not at the high end. So if you do all that work before and you find out $200 an hour is your optimal price, or 200 for an initial or whatever, then make your sliding scale 100 or 150 and 200 and 250. Don't put 200 at the top. You want it in the middle. Bartering. I love the concept of bartering so much. I love it. And again, I have tried this relatively extensively, and it always ends up being awkward. Like, people forget to send you the thing they said they were going to send you. Or I had somebody once, I always tell this story. I had somebody once offer me a used refrigerator and I was like, I just like, I feel like it's probably a good idea to have a spare refrigerator, but also I just don't know where I would keep a spare refrigerator. Like, what if they give you the refrigerator and it's got mold inside or it doesn't actually work? These are the things that come up so many times where I've had people, we've done trades and they just sort of like tapered off and they didn't bill it, finalize their end. And you actually still have to pay taxes on the value of the trade. So you really don't want to be trading for something that you don't actually want, that you wouldn't be willing to pay money for, because you are still going to be paying your self-employed taxes on the value of whatever you traded for. So if somebody says, I'll come, I'll give you my refrigerator for your initial consult that was $200, then you are paying the taxes on the $200. So anyway, however, it's such a lovely model, and I feel like there's got to be a way to make it work, but I personally have not cracked that. Also, pay from the heart. Some of you all have seen this in some of my programs, which is where there'll be usually 3 prices, and it'll be sort of like a low, a medium, and a high. It's almost like a modified sliding scale, but it's easier for people to place them because it's not, if you're going sliding scale from 80 to 250, like I could choose 81, I could choose 82, I could choose 84.50, I could choose 95. It's a lot of decisions for people to make, like where exactly are they going to be? So I feel like pay from the heart is a lot easier for people, and it's a little bit easier to describe. So, when I do it, I'm often just like student, practitioner, newer practitioner, experienced practitioner, or, um, you know, community care price, regular price, pay it forward price. It's kind of easier just to describe what does this mean? Like, are you, people just sort of do it. Um, so it's a little bit easier to choose. And it is a little bit harder to set, there's technical stuff of setting these up, sliding scale and pay from the heart, or a little bit more challenging just to set up the payment processing and to track your numbers and all that kind of thing. Another model that I really love is offering a specific number of free or discounted spots. So if you feel like I really, really, really want to have some of my spots available to people who absolutely cannot afford to come work with me otherwise, I encourage you to give yourself a number, say like, okay, I can do 2 or 3 hours a month or a week or whatever, depends on your schedule. I have X number of time that I'm willing to donate or work for less money in a community model. And then that's what you have, right? So either you say, I have one client a month that I will take at no charge, and they just fill as they fill. You're like, okay, January's full, there's a February spot. If you want to wait till February, then there's a March spot. And they just, if somebody can either wait until the next one is available or they can book in at your present rate. I feel like that's very fair. And then another model, I've heard this described, but I haven't seen it done, but I really love the concept, which is having some kind of prime time spots where you're like, okay, each month I have, let's say my working hours are like 10 to 3 or something on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But I have clients who really want to come at 7 p.m., but that's not convenient for me because I have to pay for childcare and I can't make dinner and, blah, blah, blah. 7 p.m. is suboptimal for me. Maybe what you do is you say, okay, my 10 to 3 is my normal rate, and I will have, the 10 a.m. spot is discounted each day. And then if people want to come in at 7 p.m., it is 20% upcharge, like it's just the 7 p.m. spots are more expensive. And so you can choose you book yourself in. Yeah, demand pricing. There you go. You could do it like that, or you could do it, further out scheduled is discounted, and then the immediate appointments are a little bit more important. You can play around with some of those types of things. And Yamaya, you would have to choose what you wanted to offer in terms of the intake alone is free, intake and follow-up is free, etc. The way that I do it is that I have for people to come in my community clinic, it's 3 visits that are included. So the intake and 2 follow-ups. And then if they want to continue care after that, they can. And either, somebody can offer them a discounted rate if they want to, or you could just be, it could just be full price if they wanted to continue on. Usually follow-up prices are lower anyway. And so they've got a good start. They might not need to come in as frequently, etc. Yeah, Friday after 4 could be your demand pricing. Just be like, yeah, I will start my weekend later, but you also, there will be an upcharge for that. That's fair, I think. And especially, if you call a plumber on the weekend, you're not going to be paying your Tuesday afternoon prices and so forth. All right, I want to share a few extra thoughts about packages, discounts, putting your prices up online, and groups, because that comes up a lot. All right, so here, this is just another reminder to look at your offers and figure out which ones are actually working financially for you, to include any classes you teach, any packages, any group programs, etc. So you want to factor in what are taking up the most time. So I'm encouraging you to think about, is there a way that you could structure a service or a package such that it is streamlined for you and designed to support the client? So I'm going to give you an example. My practice for a very long time just was kind of the standard that I was taught in school, which is you have your initial, it's longer, and then you have a follow-up, and you try to schedule it, you schedule follow-ups after the initial every so often. And I did that for a very long time. And then I was like, oh, what if I do like a 2-session, intake and 1 follow-up, and blah, 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 blah. I've tried all sorts of variations. And what I've come to realize recently is that what works best for my clients and me, the way that I like to practice, is if I can see people frequently for several months at a time. So last year, I guess it was, I set up a package that was like, it's a 3-month package. We're going to meet every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm checking in with you weekly via a form that automatically gets sent. There's messaging, I'm all up in people's business, I say, for 3 months. And that's then the package is over, and people can either re-up, or they can not, or they can schedule individual follow-ups. And I was like, oh, okay, this works really well for me for a variety of reasons. I find that 3 months is really about the amount of time that it takes for people to actually do things and see if they're going to work. But if you don't really do it, I can't tell if it's working, and people need the frequent follow-up to stay on top of it for 3 months. So for me and my clients, I was like, this is what's going to work best for me. And then I was able to price it based on that. For your information, it's $1,000 for the 3 months, so $333 a month, which includes not only the visits, but the weekly check-in forms, and then messaging between visits, which some people do amply and some people don't do at all. And I'm going to say probably like 75% of people renew it, like they do it again, or they can kind of go down to like a less frequent visit cadence. But that's that's an experiment, but it's been working really well for me. But I'm wondering, is there a way that you could configure your own setup based on what you think works best for your clients and the way that you work? Because what works for you and your clients is probably not what works for your clients. Linda, that's 6. It's 2 sessions a month. So think about it. Is there a way that you can do that? And then for me, I was able to say, okay, I could explain what's involved in this package. Like, here's why I do it this way. I can say, hey, I found that what works best for people is small changes over time, that it's easy to fall off track. It's easy to get started and then have life happen. So what I want to do is be in touch with you frequently. I want to make teeny tiny baby steps, and I want to be able to answer all your questions pretty much right away. We're just going to do this for 3 months and see how you feel. And no, Amy, they're not. The first session is an hour and the rest of it is 30 minutes. So I think the way that I explain it makes sense to people. And I think people like the idea, my people like the idea of just sort of a intensive 3 months, and not like an indefined, we're just going to sort of like loosey-goosey do this. So think about it. Is there a way that you might be able to do that? Now, I've been doing this work for, again, 20 years. So this might not be the right option for you. but maybe something like it would be, or maybe this stimulates some ideas of what you might be able to put together for your clients. I think why it's working is because it's inspired by what I thought would actually help people make a change. I didn't only come at this from like, what do I need to make in order to make this worth my time? But like, what do I actually think is going to help the type of clients that I work with? And this is what I thought would help, and it does seem to be helping. But if it didn't, the thing is, I've had lots of things where I thought, oh, this is the perfect thing. And I put it up there as an option, and 0 people signed up, or like 1 over a year. So you sometimes you're just going to make a guess and it's not the right thing, and that's okay. You could just try again, or reconfigure it a little bit and see what you do. Okay, so let's talk about discounts and specials. If you are constantly having sales or discounts, it just trains people to wait for the discount. So if you priced yourself so that there's some wiggle room, let's say you decided you really need to make $200 an hour and you decided I'm going to charge $220 because I want to have some accessibility pricing and blah, blah, blah. Great. Then periodically you can have a sale and make it down to 200. Again, this is just this is like I'm not saying you need to charge 200. I'm just giving. But if you're constantly like, oh, 50% off, 20% off, people just wait till the next time you have a discount. So I don't encourage you to have sales or discounts much. If you have a product that you have already made, such as like a pre-recorded class or a ebook or something like that, fine, have a discount periodically. I feel like that's different. But your actual hours, I really encourage people to rarely, if ever, have a sale. I think you can offer, if you want to and you feel moved, you can say to somebody, I will work with you for 50% off because I get to do that based on my heart and what's available to me. But you're not advertising like, oh, I'm having a 50% off sale, sign up now, in my opinion. If you do have them, make sure that you account for them in your pricing model. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to have a Black Friday sale every year and put my services on 50% off, great, but make sure that that still works in the way you've configured how much money you're making and that sort of thing. And then lastly, instead of having a discount, maybe you run a sale or a special that involves an extra thing, such as could you add on that ebook that you wrote or your recipe library or something that's easy or completely already done that you can throw in as a bonus versus a discount. So some things that I've seen people do are to say, I'm doing open office hours once a month for all my clients to like drop in and have questions. If you have a pre-recorded course on something, you can say, oh, it'll include free access to my XYZ course. If you're already doing a salve making workshop, you could say all my current clients will get free, can come for free to my salve workshop. That's a little bit weird because then you have materials. But anyway, you get what I'm saying here. If you can add something on as a bonus sale special thing, I would encourage you to do that versus discount the price people are paying. Publishing your price. I feel strongly that it's best to publish your price. There are definitely, as I did my search this morning, there are definitely people out there where you have to contact them and set up a discovery call, talk to them to get their price. And I think what happens is people just assume it's too expensive and that you're going to try to talk them into it. You're going to do a big sales push, or they assume that their nervous system is overactivated and they don't want to talk to you. Like there are people, myself included, I'm like, if I have to get on the phone with you, it's not happening. It's not happening. It's like, I'm like, text me, fine. I do not want to talk to you on the phone. So anyway, I think if you really want to not publish them, you can, but consider just publishing at least a range of your prices, because otherwise people don't know, like, am I going to get on the phone and find out it's $7,000 and I was thinking it was 175? People hesitate to be super embarrassed and then to feel like you're going to have a sales push to try to talk you into buying a $7,000 thing. And you're like, actually, I would rather eat. So anyway, that's my thought. I love these two quotes on undercharging. I'm not going to read them to you, but I do think that there's this idea that not charging a lot is virtuous. And I think that not being able to live based on the work that you do is a problem. And I think this point here that if the only people that can afford to do this are people who are independently wealthy, then we have a separate justice problem. So it is absolutely okay to charge what feels like a reasonable price to meet your own needs. And figuring out how to get there is a marketing issue, which is again a slightly separate class. All right, so I really hope that some of what we've covered has helped you to think through pricing models that may work for you. I want to open up to questions. I didn't exactly talk about groups, so I want to talk about that right now very briefly. I forgot to add that slide in there. Sorry. Y'all, groups are great. However, the amount of marketing that you need to do to fill a group is high. Okay, so filling a group once is not that bad for most of us. Like the first time you run something, if you have a decent mailing list or a social media, etc., usually you can get a reasonable amount of people in a group. The second time you run it and the beyond, if you have not been doing substantial marketing effort to get your more people on your email list or more people following you on social, it will just taper right off. Because when you think about just like number of people that you need to reach in order to bring someone into a group, it is quite large. So you absolutely can run groups if you have access to a pretty steady stream of new people, and or if you have a lot of time and or money to invest in outreach, and growing your audience. Linda's asking about how we raise pricing. Yes. Okay. So I have some thoughts on this. First of all, if you go to a therapist, most therapists are just going to raise the price once a year. It just is what it is. And they will send you a notice and it'll say, hey, prices are going up starting on, November 1st. Instead of 125, it will now be 135. And that's that. And you too can do that. You also can just tell people starting January 1st, my new rates will be what have you, whatever. If you wanted to, you could say if you want to buy a package or stock up before then, great. If you wanted to say I'm keeping rates the same for my current clients and I will raise them for new clients, you can do that. There are tagging features in EMRs like Practice Better that you can use to make that happen. I recommend though that you just go ahead and raise them. Like just if you want to give people the chance of, for me, if I were thinking about it right now, I'd probably do it January 1st. And I would just send out a message to my clients and I'd say, hey, as a heads up, January 1st, my rates are going up from, 180 to 200 for follow-up visits that are 60 minutes. If you want to stock up and buy some at the current rate, I have a session of 5. You can do that here. Otherwise, looking forward to moving forward with you. Have a great October. Happy Halloween. Don't explain. I don't think you need to say like prices have gone up. The Kerrygold costs $11. Like I gotta raise my prices here. Can't go butterless. But you can you don't have to justify it. It is what it is. They're going up. So just let people know, short and sweet. If you want to give them the option to buy at the current rate, you can, but you don't have to. And you just go from there. Okay, Bonnie Rose says, I've done market research for my region. I'm the most expensive herbalist in your area by far. I don't think I'm charging enough. Thoughts? Other people have similar or more training than you. Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging one because people are coming into this work from all different circumstances. And there are people who are essentially doing work as a hobby, where they're like, I have other resources, either another job or again, a spouse, a partner, wealth from another situation, whatever it is. And I'm like, I just want to see clients and I want to charge $30 and whatever it is. And I think that in your area, I mean, I happen to know Bonnie Rose lives in San Francisco, and it's, that's a pricey place to be. And I think that you deserve to be making an amount. And I know Bonnie Rose is not out there like, let me just get on my yacht and, go do my private chef and all of this. Like you're just trying to, have a sustainable, reasonable living where you can pay for your basic expenses and, some extra to do. Hopefully folks are planning an extra to do things that are nurturing and, make life exciting. So I think that you need to charge what you need to charge. And if it is way more expensive than what other people are charging, great. But what I think that means is that you need to make a case. You don't need to be like, I'm more expensive and here's why. But that does mean that your marketing needs to be really clear on why you, right? Like if I go to your website and you sound kind of the same as every other herbalist, and every other herbalist is 75% or 50% of the price, there's just not a reason. And unless I just know you and I know you're awesome, so maybe there is a reason. But for the random person who's just looking for a practitioner, there's no compelling reason if you don't make one. So what you want to do is essentially highlight what is special about the work that you do. You don't have to denigrate other people, obviously, but really explaining like, okay, here, this is where maybe having a package or a bundle or something might make sense because you're like, okay, here is the process. This is not just you're coming to talk to me. This is bigger. This is, what is the big picture here? What is the real work that we're doing? Getting into that and talking people through like, here's the steps of, how we work together and how things evolve. I think you make the case for why me? Why me? Why now? That sort of thing. But I don't think you lower your price to match everybody else if you know in your heart that that is not sustainable and that is not where you want to be. To me, yeah. And I know we're over time, so folks need to go. Please don't feel obliged to stay on. I'm happy to stay and answer some more questions, but it is recorded, so if you have other things, please feel free. Linda says, can I speak about program pricing, tiers, same considerations as one-on-one pricing? Maybe. I think that a program, it depends on what's included in it. Um, I think if it's the same experience for everyone, you certainly could have a pay from the heart type of thing where you're like, hey, the way I often phrase it is like, this is the bare minimum that's needed to kind of like keep the lights on. This is the amount that I think the phrasing that I use is like the middle is the amount that's needed to pay me and others a fair wage for this work. And then the third price is like the amount that's needed to subsidize other folks and make the work more accessible to people who can't otherwise afford it. So I think you could do that. And again, the middle price is the price that you want to get paid mostly. And then you have like the two other ends. So you could absolutely do that. But otherwise, I think that otherwise I would just have a price. Certainly, I think a pricing plan where you're like, okay, if it's $500, could they pay it in the $100 a month for 5 months? That usually makes it much more accessible to people. I don't upcharge for payment plan. It's very easy for me. It doesn't cost me any more money. So I just divide it by however many payments and there it is. The other thing you can do is sometimes you can have a program with add-ons where you're like, okay, the basic version is here, or you can get that plus 2 private calls with me, and you kind of wrap that into the price. So I think that's another option where it's sort of like the basic and the deluxe version. You can do that, and that can be a way to modify the program. That makes sense. Okay, amazing. So thank you all for being here. Are you feeling like, okay, you have some information, you have some direction when it comes to thinking about your price? My intention is not to tell you what to charge, but to give you some resources and suggestions for what you might think about when you're coming up with it. Um, Just remember if you go back and you're like, wow, it feels too high to me, it's okay to lower them. Or if you're like, wow, I've been undercharging all this time, you can bump it. You can bump it up.
Yeah, can I ask another question?
Yes.
Um, this like idea of a package, I know we've talked about this before, but you mentioned that sometimes it's a matter of marketing and like you're kind of telling me like, okay, maybe you want to do the package and explain why I'm unique and what my thing is. But I guess what I what's my question? Is that marketing? Is that what you would call marketing, not like pricing?
The marketing, I think of the marketing as the way that you're describing what you do and then how you are talking about it in the wider and wilder world. Um, that is the marketing part, is how do I find people who are interested in the work that I'm doing?
Hmm. I guess I struggle like somebody was suggesting that in order to make my income more sustainable and reliable that I do more of like a package style. And I think I struggle with that because, and maybe you can speak to this, because I'm already struggling with just getting people to come on. And then they come on, and then they're supposed to book every like 8 to 12 weeks within that window, and they don't. And so then I don't get paid. And so the idea was like have people sign on for like 3 months or 6 months or a year. And I've done that in the past and I didn't feel like it worked. And I'm like, I feel like it's already like my initial is like 310. And I'm like, I feel like it's already so hard to find the people that are going to pay 310 that like would it really make sense if then I'm being like, okay, to start, it's like 450 and it, and you have to come back because I guess yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's the question.
Well, I think what the difference is you're are you selling a visit or two visits or whatever number of visits it is, or are you selling like a seasonal deep dive into your own ecosystem? And I'm just making stuff up. I'm not trying to say you personally should sell that, but there's a difference between I'm going to do a 3 month intensive with Camille and I'm going to pay for 6 visits with Camille. Does that make sense? Like when I was doing it singly, people were not coming back for 6 visits, and I would definitely not see them this often. And I'm charging more now than I did. But I think because it's in the framework of it's not just you're paying for 6 visits, you're paying for 3 months of intensive work with me to like really get all into what's going on and try to figure it out step by step, piece by piece. And so I think people are paying for that versus I'm paying for 6 visits. Wow, how much is that per visit? I don't think people care. I think I could do 5 visits. I think I could do 10 visits. I think they would be fine to pay for either of those also.
It sounds like the difference that you're making is the marketing. It's like how you talk about it. If like you could have 6 visits and 6 visits, but one of them is like Camille's program and one of them is 6 visits.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's the concept. I think it's more than just the marketing because it is different from coming in to just have 6 visits with me because the way I'm doing it is also different. Like I'm checking in more often and there's a defined endpoint and um, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, it is the way that I talk about it is mostly the difference.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. And I think you can get creative. I mean, you can say like, oh, this an idea that I've had. I don't see people in person, but if I did and I wanted to like build up a practice here where I live, one of the things I might do is say like, oh, we're going to do um, like a personal health slash apprenticeship where we're going to work on your own health, but then also you're going to like come with me and learn how to make fire cider and how to harvest and how to wildcraft locally and like it's going to be like an all around deep dive into your own health and the basics of herbalism. And it's going to be like a little, mentorship slash deep dive into your own body's inner workings. I feel like that would be a really cool package. Or like for somebody who wanted to learn about herbs and themselves, I feel like you could do a cool package that's like, um, it's a 12-month package, and every month you're going to be having a different, um, either a single herb or like a different energetic formula to work with each month. And you're going to learn like, what does this feel like in your body, and how does we're going to talk about your own energetics and this herb, how the herbs interact with your own body. Like, I feel like there's so many ways you could guide people through what they want and what you like to do. Um, anyway, so I think those are some ideas. Like, well, I guess what I'm saying is don't just be like, oh, I'll just kind of like, not that Bonnie Rose was trying to do this, but I don't want people to feel trapped in like, this is what Camille's doing, so I should try to do something similar. I think there's like 1,000 ways that you can get creative. And like, I think it would be cool to do an art slash personal health intensive, or, like art journaling plus herbs. Or there's people that could do like tarot and astronomy. I mean, those are things I don't know really anything about, but I think if that's an interest or a area for people, there could be like cool overlaps there. And, are there ways to like weave in some things that make it fun and illuminating and deep and meaningful for people? Um, you know, let's do them. Let's try them.
Thanks, Camille. There's a lot to think about. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. I love everybody's questions. Okay. Well, I have kept you long enough. I apologize for going a little bit over, but I think it was hopefully worth it to hear everybody's questions and comments and stuff. If other things come up, let me know. Otherwise, you'll hear from me the next day or two with uh, recording, resources, slides, etc. Keep me posted on how you go with your pricing. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Thank you, Camille.
You are very welcome.
Thanks.